Gender inequality. I mean, it's everywhere, right? You see it in healthcare, in politics, in the economy, but because it's so massive and complex, it creates a huge challenge.
So how do you actually measure it? How do you put a number on something so multifaceted? How can you tell if one country is doing better than another, or if we're even making progress over time? Because they say if you can't measure it, you can't fix it. Okay, so let's get into it.
Well, to tackle that exact problem, the United Nations came up with this really powerful tool. It's called the Gender Inequality Index, or GII for short, and it's designed to slice right through all the noise and give us a single, standard number we can all work with.
Now, the easiest way to wrap your head around it is to think of it like a golf score. Seriously, a score of 0 means you've got perfect equality. Awesome. A score of 1 means total inequality. Terrible. So the most important thing to remember here is the lower the GII score, the better.
So what's actually under the hood of this index? What does it measure? Well, it doesn't try to measure absolutely everything. Instead, it zeroes in on 3 core areas, 3 dimensions where the inequality between men and women is usually the most obvious.
And those 3 big areas are reproductive health, empowerment, and the labor market. So let's break down what each of those really means.
First up, reproductive health. And this one is probably the most fundamental. It looks at 2 frankly life-or-death indicators: maternal mortality, which is how many women die because of pregnancy or childbirth, and the adolescent birth rate. Together, these 2 things tell us so much about a woman's basic health, her safety, and her control over her own body.
Next, we've got empowerment, and this is measured in 2 ways. First, what percentage of seats in a country's parliament are held by women? That's all about political voice. And second, what's the level of secondary education for women compared to men? This, of course, represents access to knowledge and opportunity.
And finally, we have the labor market. This one's measured by a single, really powerful indicator: the labor force participation rate. It simply compares the percentage of women who are either working or looking for work to the percentage of men doing the same. It's a really clear snapshot of economic inequality.
Okay, so now that we know what's in the index, what does it actually tell us about the world today? Let's zoom out and take a look.
The world's average GII score is 0.455. Now, that might just seem like a random number, but what it represents is actually incredible. The UN calculates this as a 45.5% loss in potential human development just because of the inequality between men and women. That is an absolutely staggering global cost.
In this chart, wow, this really tells the story. You can see so clearly how development and equality are linked. For countries with very high human development, the average GII is super low, just 0.125. But then look all the way to the other side. The low development group, their average is a way higher 0.571. The takeaway couldn't be clearer. As a country develops, gender inequality tends to go down.
The global average is one thing, but to really understand what's going on, you have to look at the extremes. To make this data feel real, let's put the countries at the very top and the very bottom of the list side by side. So on one end of the spectrum, you have Denmark. They're ranked number 1 with a GII score of 0.003. I mean, that's about as close to perfect equality as you can get. And then on the complete opposite end, you have Yemen, ranked 172nd with a score of 0.838. The gap between those 2 numbers is just immense. Let's see what that actually looks like in real life.
So let's start with reproductive health. In Denmark, fewer than 5 women per 100,000 die from pregnancy-related issues. In Yemen, that number is over 183. That's a nearly 40 times higher risk just for the basic act of bringing a child into the world. Just let that sink in for a second. Okay, now let's look at empowerment and political voice. In Denmark's parliament, women hold almost 44% of the seats. That's getting pretty close to parity. In Yemen, women hold just 0.3% of the seats. The difference in representation and having a voice at the highest levels of government, it just couldn't be more dramatic. And finally, let's look at the labor market. In Denmark, you can see a gap in who is participating in the workforce, but it's relatively small, right? About 8 percentage points. But now, look at Yemen. While nearly 66% of men are in the labor force, less than 6% of women are. This isn't just a gap, it's a chasm. It shows an almost complete exclusion of women from the formal economy.
So after looking at all these numbers, some of them pretty shocking, what's the big takeaway? Why does tracking this index, why does this data matter so much?
So what have we really learned? Well, first, that gender inequality isn't just one thing. It's a complicated web of issues that cut across health, power, and money.
Second, the gaps around the world are enormous. And third, and this is so important, the GII gives us a clear, standardized way to see the problem. And that is the whole point. You can't manage what you don't measure. This index is that essential first step toward making real, meaningful progress.
And that brings us right back to the UN's own words. The Gender Inequality Index is a composite measure. It isn't just one number, it's a reflection of these three absolutely critical parts of human life. It's a sophisticated tool for a very complex problem. And it gives us a map of where we all stand and just how far we still have to go.
So this all leads us to one final crucial question. The GII does an incredible job of showing us the scale of the problem, the shape of the problem. But the one thing the data can't do is tell us what to do about it. So I'll leave you with this to think about. Now that we can measure the problem so clearly, what's the solution?